Getting back to this, I've taken this, that's a 17mm nut off of the axle, and I started looking at this brake line, and it's just a rubberized brake line. And you know, I'm thinking I might buy a braided brake line because that one is so soft. I'm betting there's going to be a lot of flex in that brake, and I could kind of feel the spongy feel of the brake. I'm betting that's from the flex of that line. Let's see if we can find a braided brake line. I am sitting at my computer and looking at brake lines. So check this brake line out. That is a, see if we can get a better view of that here. Let me kind of show it here. It's a braided brake. Braided, is it still braided brake line? Let's see. Material, steel and PVC. That's perfect. 10mm diameter ends. 28-degree banjo bolts. That's perfect. That's exactly what I've got. And it is 900mm long, and that is 35.4 inches ish. I think that's about right. And that's gonna work out perfect. So let's order one of those. When can I get it? I can get it tomorrow. That's gonna be perfect. So, guys, one of the last things we need to do is get this brake line replaced. And I have a new brake line, and I really don't want to make a mess, right? Because this is gonna, the brake fluid would come down over the forks, the tire, the wheel. I just don't want really to make too much of a mess. So the plan of attack here is to disconnect the brake line from here, let it drain completely. We'll take the top off the reservoir, let that drain all the fluid out. I want to replace the fluid anyways. Once I've got that drained out, I will put a towel around the top part here to kind of make sure that I'm not going to leak any excess down onto any part of the bike. Brake fluid is very corrosive. And then I'll take and I'll replace the line, put the new banjos on the top, loose on the bottom. I'm going to fill the reservoir and let it leak down through this tube to prime the tube so I don't have to try to get all that air out. And once it's leaked out onto the ground here, I'll tighten up that banjo and fill the reservoir, and then we'll bleed the brakes. Guys, I've got the cap off the top here. I've got a towel around there for any spills, and I'm draining the brake fluid out just by loosening that banjo right there. We'll wait for that to drain, and we'll put on the other brake line. The new brake line on, that worked pretty well. Primed the whole tube, just let it drain until it starts dripping out, and then it's ready to go. And I tightened up that banjo, filled the reservoir the rest of the way, and now I'll bleed the brakes. Easy job. Bleeding that brake line was really simple once we primed it with brake fluid and letting it drain down through until it's dripping out. Just a few air bubbles in the system at that point. Bled the brakes. Much stiffer line than this noodle that came off, but I think that'll improve the braking feel on that brake lever. Alright guys, here's what those brake lines look like. They're actually a perfect match for it, and the steel braided line's a lot stiffer, and I think will hold the pressure a lot better. This brake lever here, on the other hand, that I straightened out a little bit. I actually put it on the bench, turned it upside down, and covered it with a towel, and kind of whacked it with a rubber mallet a few times just to straighten that out so I'd have a bit more leverage. That way I can use 2 fingers rather than a whole hand to pull on the brake, and it doesn't come all the way back to the bar. Welcome to the shock video. Well, it's not a shocking video, but it's about shocks. So on the bike here, on the CT125, look at these tiny little shocks. And thanks to the guys and gals on the Ice Bear forum, they gave me a good recommendation to pick up some shocks. Appreciate the recommendation, guys. Here's the shocks. Let me pull them out of the box and see what they look like compared to those. Here's what they look like. So there is that shock, and that is what we're replacing it with right there. And you can tell there is quite a difference in the size of that shock. The size of the shaft, everything is quite a bit larger. And they look pretty cool. So there's the shocks right there. I'm going to go ahead and adjust them. You can adjust them here at the bottom end just to make them the exact length as these. And as soon as I get that done, I'll put them on and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so quickly, take these 2 bolts off. I'm only going to take one side off at a time. I'm going to measure these out to get them exact. and I had to remove this bolt, that bolt, and then loosen up this bolt on the other side and take the other one off here so I can back this off. I can take the rack off just a little bit so I can take that off. We're gonna do that, pull the shock off. What do you think that looks? I think that looks pretty good. I was able to extend the shock the exact same as the other one, which is fantastic. And then inside the kit, they give you these little spacers. So there's a larger spacer and a smaller spacer. And for the shock, you need a larger one on top and a smaller one on bottom. So it's perfectly set up for that. That's a good deal. Let's get the other one on. Shock's on, you got the rack going on, and if you have this rack, just make sure you put a little bit of the put a little Loctite, blue Loctite on your bolts, little carriage bolt that's going in there, and that's going to keep that one tight. A washer, instead of a washer on this side, I want to move, you can see how the exhaust would hit. So I'm gonna actually put another bolt or another nut on the inside of this flange, and then the retainer on the outside, and that'll space out just enough so the exhaust is not hitting the shock. On the other side, it won't need that. All right, guys, I'm pretty excited about the rear shocks. So we finished up the front shocks and put some heavier weight oil in those, so those are gonna react a lot better. But then the rear shocks, these things right here, are just really springs with little tiny struts. The same size struts that are in my car to hold the back tailgate up. So they're really, really tiny. They basically just pogo sticks. And when you take a look at these are much larger. They've got a little damper here for the bottoming. You can adjust with the little levers here. You can adjust the spring load, so you can change the spring load. You can actually adjust the amount of air that's in these shocks. These are air shocks. You can put nitrogen in them if you want to, but you'd have to take the air out or just fill them with as much nitrogen as you want for the pressure you want. And you can change the rate with that a little bit. You can change the length of these with the bolt here. So these are stock height. I bring them 13 inches eyeball to eyeball, and they came about 12, I think 12 and a half. And so you just run these out a little bit. It's still got about a ½ an inch of bolt left up in the shock there from the bottom. Bolts to the top there. Adjusting this side super easy. Adjusting the other side, you got the exhaust here, so you end up using a couple of screwdrivers if you want to adjust that a little bit. There you got to pull it looks like you'd have to pull the pipe off. I put a little bit of a spacer in there. You can see that, another extra bolt, and that keeps the exhaust away from the shock. And then of course, instead of their stickers, which you see here in my hands, they just kind of falling off. So I put my own TRC Adventures stickers on my shocks. Not a lot to say here except that I am swapping out that sprocket. There's the 14. Can you even see that? There we go. The 14 to the 17. Quite a bit difference, but there you go. Got that one on there. And it's time for the chain. So now we've got a Pro Taper PT 420 MX chain. It is gold. It is not a X-ring or O-ring, and that is because they will roll a lot easier on a small displacement bike. Just keep your chain greased and run it like that, and it runs freer. Takes very little horsepower, but these have very little horsepower. So let's say you lose a ½ a horsepower. That's a lot on this bike, not a lot on a big bike. I'm not saying you lose a ½ horsepower, but just anything it matters. So let's take a look at that chain, because that is not easy. Let's see, I'll get it out of here first. There we go. The gold chain, bling bling. Let's get that on the bike. We'll measure out that chain, get it to figure out what length we need to cut it to. I bought a way longer chain than I needed, but it's just in stock, so get it quick. That's the chain. And then I've got the Motion Pro chain tool, which is one I use. I've gone through a couple of these. This one seems to last pretty well, so it's a good one to have. a lot of little adapters, and will make easy work of splicing that chain. Nice thing about this chain, it's also a chain with a master link, which makes it easier for taking it on and off. Comes with a little extra grease too. There we go. This is a quick getting dirty. I actually checked that chain twice, checked that length. I pulled it off, then I put it back on and checked it again. I put my chain tool, or the splicing tool, in the vise there so I could use it there. Turns out my splicing tool doesn't have a small enough thing for those lengths, so I end up just punching it out with a punch in the end. But it worked okay. Alright guys, we got that chain splitted. Actually, my chain splitter is too large for this chain, so I got it part way out, and then I just had to, I just hammered it out with a punch. Came out real easy once it was started, so that's done. And then we're putting in the master link, and they put a little grease on there, set it through. And the one thing I just wanted to point out with the master link is that you want your little clip to go the direction of the chain, so if it were to hit on anything, if it's this way going around, it could pop off if it touches something. This way it won't, so the little butt of it forward. Well guys, that wraps it up for this video, and we've got a lot of testing to do, lots of new parts, so I got a lot of time to go out and get this thing checked out. We'll get some video of that and some of the minor modifications we'll make coming up. So stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, and hit that like button and that little bell icon to get reminders for my next videos. Cheers.